What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Week 17 NFL Power Rankings. This week, we're going to do things just a little bit differently as opposed to showing who's going up or down from the following week. We're actually going to look back at my preseason Power Rankings, my deep dive series, and I'm a little nervous to do this because, I don't have to do this. It's not going to look great. There's obviously a lot of change throughout the season, like every NFL season. You guys are already ruthless in the comment sections about my normal power rankings. Just imagine over the course of the season. But I have no shame. I dare you to find a 13-hour series breaking down every team in depth with as accurate of predictions as I had this year. I'm very proud of that. So, if you want to hate on my preseason predictions, that's fine, but I do encourage you to look at NFL Network's preseason rankings that I will link in the description before you do that, and show me your own preseason predictions before you get into any of that stuff. But no shame here. It's going to be fun. Once we get into the actual playoff contending teams, we'll talk a little bit more about how they shape up heading into the playoffs, but for the teams that are eliminated, we might do a little more talking about reflecting on the season they've had. And then these rankings do not include whatever happens in the Monday night game. Raiders, Broncos, don't really care what happens anyway. Not going to change anything anyway, but it's Christmas Eve. Not staying up to do these rankings tonight. And then make sure you subscribe because we will be getting into the playoff predictions this time next week. This is the last regular season power rankings of the season. So let's get into it here, starting with the Arizona Cardinals coming down 14 spots this year. Really I thought their defense would be better, and it wasn't. They need to do a lot of work in that front office, building around not just Josh Rosen and that offense that needs a lot of work, but the defense as well. It's not a bad defense, but they just really don't have any superstars outside of Patrick Peterson and Chandler Jones. And not that you need a bunch of superstars, but they just lack overall talent across the board, and I really do think they're in a pretty bad way entering next year. And then number 31, Cincinnati Bengals. And the other thing here is a lot of these movements are very injury related, especially on the back end here. And the Bengals just ravaged by injuries. I think they would still come in around that 16 to 20 range. They actually had a pretty good season before they got so hurt. And I have a feeling Marvin Lewis will be back. Andy Dalton will be back. They'll continue to be kind of that 10-win playoff contender that'll probably get bounced in the first round if they make it. And I don't see a lot of changes in the offseason for Cincinnati, though. They could surprise and mix things up for once. And then number 30, the Oakland Raiders. We thought they were going to be bad. This ranking of 25 before the season was before they traded away Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper, so to only move down 5 spots, they just are in full rebuild. There's nothing else to really say about them. It'll probably be Derek Carr next season. I don't see them drafting a quarterback. And then number 29, the Washington Redskins. Again, injuries just ravaged this team, honestly, for about the third year in a row. And I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's some old Indian voodoo curse because they want them to change their name, but this team just frankly cannot stay healthy. They cut DJ Swearinger today. My guess is out of playoff contention. They were just kind of tired of him in the locker room and knew he wouldn't be back. It is kind of unfortunate for the 11 playoff teams that don't get DJ Swearinger. I did tweet this out that he's not going to make as big of an impact as a lot of people hope he would come in and make. He's not a super rangy safety. He's a good player. The only way he really changes the game, in my opinion, is if he can force a fumble, which he can, but that's a little fluky. So, good player, but they were probably going to move on from him anyway, so they just cut ties with him nice and early. And then number 28, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Definitely my best call of the season. I said if I owned a house, I would bet it on the Jacksonville Jaguars to miss the playoffs, and they didn't even come close. It was Blake Bortles was just so blatantly obviously going to be this bad, and for some reason they just decided not to address the quarterback room at all, and they paid the ultimate price for it. And their future of their franchise is now a serious question mark. Number 27, the Denver Broncos. Just a lot of injuries lately. Not a super high upside with Case Keenum to kind of carry that team, carry an injured team. The defense is fine, but not elite. So, not much else to really say about Denver. Number 26, the New York Jets. They have really come on strong. They let the game get away from them against Green Bay. They did have some pretty big special teams plays as well. But Sam Darnold is going to provide the light that this organization needs. He looks like a future not just franchise quarterback, but potentially an elite type of quarterback, in my opinion. His game reminds me of like a mobile Phillip Rivers. He kind of has that weird throwing motion that just is somehow able to be remarkably accurate on the move, yet he's actually fast as opposed to Phillip Rivers. And he also has kind of the ability to make the dumb interception as well. But they put the right pieces around him. They will have something very special in Sam Darnold. And then number 25, the 49ers. Obviously, just injuries. We didn't get to see what this team could turn into with Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, they're playing well with Nick Mullins, though. I can't imagine they'd be outside of this NFC playoff race without or with Jimmy Garoppolo, rather. I think they'd be right in this thing doing similar things to what Seattle's doing, where we might get 3 playoff teams out of the NFC West. So these aren't, by the way, like anywhere close to where my preseason power rankings will be for next year, or even my off-season power rankings, which we'll continue to do plenty of power rankings as we go. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss those. But you lose your quarterback, you're not going to have a great season, especially when he's a good guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. I think very highly of him as a player. And the number 24, the New York Giants, they've kind of stayed around here all year. They haven't really surprised me in any way. Saquon Barkley, I had a good feeling was going to come in and be elite right away. Said I wouldn't be surprised if he was the best running back in the NFL the day he entered it, and that's pretty much what we've seen. But ultimately, I think they are going to regret not taking Sam Darnold, watching him develop in their own stadium for a different team. I think that's ultimately still going to prove to be a mistake. And then number 23, the Detroit Lions. They've hovered around here all year. This is one of those teams that I get here and I don't really know what to say about them. Like, their defense is fine, their offense is fine. They got really no super redeeming qualities, anything about them. Matthew Stafford's fallen off, the offense has fallen off, and the defense has been a little better. They'll probably be the exact same team next year, honestly. And then number 22, the Tampa Bay Bucks. Now, I said that this team was going to be a train wreck this year. They had moments of brightness, but they also had some pretty low points as well. I think I've earned some respect for this team, but we've done this before where we buy hype on the Bucs team, and that's a big reason I rank them so low entering the year. And who's their quarterback next year? What do they do with this defense? Why did they pass on Derwin James and take a nose tackle? There's still problems with this team. But definitely some optimism heading into next season, as they frankly might have the best receiving core in the NFL, as they'll get O.J. Howard back, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. Who knows if Deshaun Jackson will still be there. So they do have something to build around. They still need to learn how to get some bit of a run game. Like, I don't think the run game is all that important, but when you literally can't move the ball on the ground at all, it's a problem. It comes back on their defense because it leads to shorter drives, whether you go 3 and out or you score too fast. You know, the defense not only doesn't have a lot of talent, but it's just tired all the time. So a lot of work to do in Tampa, but you do have something to build around with that high-flying offense. Number 21, the Miami Dolphins, and you know, you're going to see them move up 10 spots here, but you go and watch my deep dive about this team, and I honestly think I nailed this team. I said that it ultimately would be a disappointing season. I ranked them 31st, but I think I picked them to win 6 or 7 games. I said, sure, this is a team that can win some games, but their ceiling is so freaking low that you just can't get excited about this team. And as long as Ryan Tannehill is their quarterback, that opinion's never going to change. And there were still Ryan Tannehill truthers as about week 8 of this NFL season. I'm sure there's still going to be some this offseason, but I feel like they have to be slowly disappearing in the same way that the Blake Bortles truthers did. Not that Tannehill's as bad as Blake Bortles, but man, he just has such a low ceiling every week. And then number 20, the Buffalo Bills. Again, another team that I said was going to win 6 or 7 games just because they play so well at home. And they've been one of the worst teams at points in this season, but they have really heated up. They have a lot of momentum heading into next year. They definitely need to keep building around Josh Allen, but I am impressed with how they've basically taken a bunch of nobodies, like Robert Foster's having a great year, like Jason Kroom. They bring in Isaiah McKenzie. Like, they've done a good job on offense, more or less, considering the talent they have to work with. You know, just imagine if they could get even like I don't know, I know he's injured all the time, but Sammy Watkins, like if they had a healthy Sammy Watkins, like someone to just kind of be a go-to weapon would be a huge part just to increase the ceiling of this offense and help Josh Allen develop. We know the defense is good. it's a little older, but they're a few really good players away from being a playoff team again, and Josh Allen developing away from being a team that people don't really want to see in the playoffs, especially if they could end up with home games. Number 19, the Carolina Panthers. Way too many injuries this year. Both the tackles were beat up, plus your quarterback's shoulder basically falls off his body. Like, I am definitely worried about if this is going to be an Andrew Luck situation with Cam Newton. Like, you thought Andrew Luck's arm looked bad when he was playing with a bad shoulder. It was nowhere near what we saw from Cam Newton here. So I'm curious to see how this thing's going to go. Hopefully Cam Newton's not going out and re-injuring his shoulder snowboarding. But he's got to get healthy. They need him to be able to throw the ball more than 15 yards if they're going to make a playoff run next year. But I do think they'll stay pretty stagnant. I don't think they're going to fire their coach, and this defense should be pretty solid. They need to get younger on defense, but as long as you got Luke Kuechly, you're going to be able to do some nice things defensively. Dante Jackson's a nice player, and DJ Moore looking like a really good young receiver. Christian McCaffrey continues to get better. So they got some good playmakers. They should be a playoff contender next year. I don't see why you shake things up too much here, especially when a lot of your shortcomings were because of injuries. And then the same thing can be said here for Atlanta. You're definitely concerned with how Matt Ryan was able to respond to some injuries. His team has had remarkable health over the last 3 seasons, not including this season. And we really saw when everything was perfect around Matt Ryan, he could and did win an MVP. But his O-line plays worse, his defense drops off, and all of a sudden there's more weight on him and he can't bear the burden. So I don't know if this team's ever going to get to be a Super Bowl team at this point. They kind of had their window. They're going to have to start paying some of these young defensive players, and I just don't think Matt Ryan's a guy that you can really carry a team that has a lot of stuff invested in the defense. And this offensive line, I don't know how they're going to improve this thing moving forward, and it could turn out to be really problematic. Number 17, the Green Bay Packers. Just a disappointing season all around. You look at the coaching, you look at the play of Aaron Rodgers, you look at injuries on defense, and it just was a train wreck of a season, and they have a lot of work to do. They're obviously going to enter next season with a really high upside. They'll probably still be one of the 5 or 6 favorites for the Super Bowl just because you got number 12, but they got a lot of work to do. And that's really as simple as it goes. You got to find a coach. You got to get more talent on offense. I actually think the talent on defense isn't that bad. You can find some safeties, but other than that, the one thing I will say is I don't know how they keep justifying putting Blake Martinez on the field, especially when you spent a 3rd-round pick on Oren Burks. Like, you'd think you'd at least want to find out if he can play some football. So the Packers got work to do. They fall off 15 spots. Obviously, one of the disappointing teams this year. Number 16. A very impressive team this year, the biggest jump outside of the Chicago Bears, I believe. So Cleveland, I had them ranked dead last, while Jacksonville was my best call of the year. Me saying Baker Mayfield was a terrible pick was a bad call. And I never said he was going to be a bust. Let me be clear about that. It was always more about me liking the upside of Sam Darnold. I thought Baker Mayfield was Case Keenum with a stronger arm. And you watch his game tape, that's not necessarily wrong. But I did question his ability to throw the deep ball, which he's clearly proved me wrong there. But his ability to work in the short to intermediate passing game, his mobility, that is exactly Case Keenum with a stronger arm. So I was off on Baker. I'm not going to say I was completely wrong. I was wrong saying that they shouldn't have taken him because he's clearly the perfect fit for the Browns. But the Browns, as far as they head into next season, have a lot of momentum, but like the Packers, have a lot of work to do. They need to get better offensively. I think they need more weapons. They don't need a ton more, but you can't really count on David Njoku to emerge as a consistent elite weapon, and Jarvis Landry just doesn't create a lot of separation. So they could really use a number 1 receiver, whether that's through the draft or through free agency. And then the tackle play here, you do have excellent interior line play. This is probably the best interior line in the NFL, but you do need to improve these tackles. So you got some work to do in Cleveland, but you definitely have a quarterback that can carry your team a little bit, and you definitely got some momentum heading into next year, and a division that is frankly going to be up for grabs next year. So it'll be really interesting to see what the Browns are able to do this offseason. And this is a point where I criticize this team for signing Carlos Hyde, for signing Hubbard, the tackle, and some of these other players, because I get that you want to be more competitive now, but that cap space is something you might wish you had this offseason. So, it paid off this year. They got their early wins. We'll see how it pays off down the road because they could have had more cap space than they do right now. It's not that they don't have any cap space, but they could have really blown out this offseason. 15, the Tennessee Titans, the only team staying put. How fitting is that? This is just the most average, bland team in the NFL. Some of these teams at the bottom of the power rankings are just straight up boring. I'm not going to say they're boring, even though they're not fun to watch, so maybe they are boring. But, I mean, man, it's just not a lot of excitement around this team at all. Mariota's kind of stagnated. He's a faster Alex Smith, which is fine. He doesn't have a lot of weapons on offense. They got a good line. They can run the ball. They're pretty physical on defense, but they don't have any redeeming qualities. And when you get to the playoffs, especially when you're playing good playoff teams in the regular season, you need to have that go-to, trait to your team, and the Titans just don't have it, and it's been their problem. They've been stagnant all year, right around this 14 to 16 range ever since the beginning. I think it's actually pretty funny that they're the only team that didn't move all year. And then 14, the Houston Texans. Kind of like we said, they would have some high moments, some low moments, just some holes in that roster. A ton of potential heading into next year just because Deshaun Watson has been incredible. And I wasn't sure if he was going to come back and be what he was in that 7-game stretch, and he didn't, because that 7-game stretch was unsustainable, like we all said. But he has definitely impressed this year, and his stock is definitely rising. So I still think I'm lower on this team, especially than Texans fans. They keep telling me I'm wrong, despite them only winning close games and losing to a couple games now in a short game stretch. So they're going to have a home game in the playoffs. Will they win it? Probably not, in my opinion. I don't think this team's going to beat the Colts or the Chargers at home in the playoffs. I'm sorry, Texans fans. It's an exciting team to watch. You have great moments, but for 60 minutes, I don't trust this team, especially because of that offensive line. And then number 13, the Philadelphia Eagles. Big disappointment this season. You can point a lot of that towards injuries, but they are heating up. They're finding that identity in these last couple weeks as they head into next week. And if they can get in the playoffs, as we're now starting to talk about playoff teams here, so shifting away from the season narrative as opposed to and talking about where we're heading now. So the Eagles, definitely red hot. I don't think anyone wants to play them. And Nick Foles, what Nick Foles are you going to get every Sunday? The thing about backup quarterbacks is, you have a good one who can win you in a 2 or 3 game stretch, maybe even 4 or 5, like we saw in the Super Bowl last year. But I still believe Nick Foles is probably just a high-end backup, not a starting caliber quarterback. So how long can they sustain this thing? I don't know. They're going to play the Redskins. If the Vikings lose against the Bears, which they very well might, the Eagles will be in the playoffs. So, man, I don't think Chicago or Dallas wants to see Philly in the playoffs. No way, not with that D-line. And then number 12 is going to be Dallas. Still don't trust the offense, but the defense is great. They're going to be a tough team to beat at home, but I don't see them going on the road with Dak Prescott and winning a playoff game. And then number 11, the Ravens, huge convincing win against the Chargers. Not necessarily the way they won being convincing, but to go technically on the road. It's, the soccer stadium is in a full home field advantage for the Chargers, and I've said this whole year that the Chargers are actually better on the road than at home. But regardless, it's a good win for the Ravens. They continue to prove that they can play good defense. How sustainable will that be in the playoffs? The last couple years, defense hasn't mattered as much with the new rules and the way the new offenses are. At some point, I do believe Lamar Jackson's going to have to stand in the pocket and deliver a big throw on third down, and I don't know if he can do that. We'll see. Still 1 foot in, 1 foot out on Lamar Jackson. So their stock is up. They're going to be a playoff team, it would seem, but I don't think they're going to win a playoff game, honestly. And the number 10, the Minnesota Vikings, they got to beat Chicago in Minnesota, and it's a terrible matchup for them because this is a super talented team that just can't block anyone, and the way Chicago beats you is ravaging your offensive line. So it's going to be a tough match for the Vikings. It's winning in for them. So we'll see how it plays out. I don't think anyone really wants to play them. I think Chicago would love to play them in the playoffs, but some of these other teams that don't have Khalil Mack and Hakeem Hicks, you definitely don't want to deal with this defense and these receivers. So, and Dalvin Cook's playing well as well. So if they can get in, they could make things interesting. The NFC is not nearly as good as we thought entering the season, or frankly 5-6 weeks ago. It is kind of open for business, in my opinion. And then number 9, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've just had a really hard time buying wins lately, and even if they miss the playoffs here, this is going to be a great reflection of how record doesn't always tell you how good a football team is. They've lost some really tough games lately, all of them on the road, and it's unfortunate if you're a Steelers fan, because this is, in my opinion, a team that, although it's not likely, could have won the Super Bowl this year. You see when Big Ben and Antonio Brown and Juju, when these guys are on with this offensive line, like, it's almost impossible to stop them offensively. I was wrong about their pass rush. They can really get after the quarterback. So it's a really good team that might miss the playoffs. They need some help now from the Browns, and I don't think it's impossible for the Browns to beat the Ravens next week. I really don't. I think those teams are pretty even, honestly. So if they get in, no one wants to play them. But just a disappointing end to the season. But I do think it'll be kind of the same story entering next year, assuming Big Ben comes back. And then number 8, the New England Patriots, just kind of doing their thing, beating the Bills at home this week. They're going to have a home playoff game. And I can't remember if they're going to be the 2 or the 3 seed. I think they're currently in the 3 spot. They would definitely love to get that first round bye, because that would be really big for them, especially this year, as, sorry to hate on the Patriots, but they've frankly coasted to a first round bye over this dynasty because their division's been so bad, and the AFC just hasn't been very good. And for the first time, they might not have a bye, and their conference is actually good. So they have a lot to prove this year. I just don't think they're as talented as they've been in years past. And I don't mean to hate on the Patriots. Like, I have full respect, and I was talking with my roommate earlier about how just crazy it's going to be looking back on this run. Like, Tom Brady's never missed the playoffs, as far as I can remember, other than his injured season. And just, in this era of win now windows where teams are kind of going all in, I think 10 years from now we're going to look back on this Patriots dynasty and just be like, what the hell was that? That was insane. Like, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick together, it was just unfair. But I do think this is the beginning of the end, and I'd be pretty surprised if they were able to do it again, but I'm not going to completely rule them out. I don't see them going on the road and winning a lot of playoff games, though. I just don't think they have the talent. And then number 7, the Seattle Seahawks. This is, one of my best calls of the year as well. I've said that people are sleeping on how important culture and quarterback play can be in coaching, and that's exactly how they've won games this year. You look at the NFL Power Rankings, they had them like 25th entering the year. I had them, 11th, 12th? And I basically said, I don't know if it's going to be a playoff team. They could easily sneak in. If they did, no one would want to play them, and that's exactly what we're saying right now. And they're in the playoffs. This is a team that, like Chicago or even, frankly, the Rams, you just don't want to play Russell Wilson with the way he's throwing the football right now, the way he's moving around, the way this defense is playing. They're red hot. I think they could make things interesting. This is where we're starting to talk about teams that could win the Super Bowl. I think these first 7, I wouldn't be totally surprised if any of these teams actually pulled it off. And then we get into the Colts, number 6. And yeah, they moved up 14 spots. I was, if you guys remember, when I ranked them number 20, we had gone about 6 or 7 videos of people being like, you are crazy. Where the hell are the Colts? This team sucks. And here we are. And everyone's in on the Colts, and I didn't see any power rankings that were as high as I were on the Colts at number 20. NFL had them dead last, so this was another really good call on the year. Credit Andrew Luck, credit this front office. Darius Leonard was a fantastic pick. You beef up the offensive line. They basically addressed their biggest needs other than secondary problems, and nobody wants to play the Colts. Like, if the Colts go into Foxborough in the first round of the playoffs, which I think is what we're looking at right now, because let's be honest, the Titans are not beating the Colts with Blaine Gabbert. They can't beat the Colts when they're fully healthy. So if they go into Foxborough, I just might take the Colts. And I'm really excited because we're not doing power rankings moving forward. Next week is going to be the playoff predictions. And, man, that's going to be a really fun game to pick because I seriously think that the Colts are better in just about every respect other than coaching than the Patriots, and that includes quarterback play. And then number 5, the Chicago Bears. They survive a close one against the 49ers. This was more a testament that this team is going to have a hard time going on the road and winning with Mitch Trubisky. I think if they had home field advantage for the playoffs, unfortunately they don't, they'd be my pick to win the NFC. They're just a different team at home with this defense that is one of the best I've seen in years. But I just don't trust Mitch Trubisky. I don't trust this offense. It's gimmicky. Teams seem to be catching on a little bit. And they could beat the Vikings at home in the first round of the playoffs, but I think that's about it. It's a good team. They're going to have to improve offensively, though, moving forward, as they had basically perfect health this season, and they're going to have to find a way to improve next year without a first-round pick and without any cap space, and that's going to be tough because, every team gets better year to year. Well, not every team, but most teams do, and they're going to have a hard time improving what they were this year, considering they're not getting any players back healthy other than like Kyle Long, and they don't have a lot of capital to bring in extra talent. So we'll see what they can do in the playoffs. I don't think it's going to end as a happy ending for the Bears, but this defense, any given Sunday or Saturday in the playoffs, I guess, really can take over. So we'll see. Number 4, the Rams. Basically putting them over the Bears at this point just because if these two teams did play, it would be in LA, and basically everything I just said about the Bears, I just don't think that the Bears are going to beat the Rams in LA. The offense is heating up. The defense has had some much better play lately. I still think it's got some holes. I found it interesting that Sean McVay left Ndamukong Suh in the fourth quarter when he took everybody out, basically saying, you can get hurt, I don't care. You're a replacement level player, which I think is true. He really has not been very good this year. It's really just been Aaron Donald on that defense. I don't trust Jared Goff in the playoffs. I don't see this team winning the Super Bowl, but they definitely could if they can do the right things around Jared Goff, find some new ways to get these playmakers involved because teams have caught on a little bit. But number 4 for the Rams, I think it's respectable. And then number 3, the Chiefs. No shame losing in Seattle. Honestly, it's a really hard thing to do. Some of the best teams in the league have lost in Seattle this year. This offense is young with Patrick Mahomes at the helm, and they've had a hard time winning the biggest games this year, but you do point to the defense to blame for that, not the offense, and that is my biggest concern would be the defense. This is probably the offense I trust the most to be able to score 30 points every week this year. And then number 2, the Chargers. They do lose to the Ravens. It was a close game. I just think this team is going to be able to regain some momentum. They just have so much talent. Like, do they actually get Hunter Henry back? That'd be crazy. So one loss isn't going to change the things they've accomplished this year. They're, like I've said this whole time, I think they're actually better on the road anyway. And I don't think this team should have a bye week because this is not an organization that I think can take a week off and then come back focused. Like, there's just way too many things about this organization that I have questions about. So I think it's best that this team keep playing and honestly maybe go on the road to like Houston or I guess it wouldn't be Houston, would it? It'd be the Ravens or the Steelers. Like, I think that's best case for them. Anyway, so I like the Chargers here, number 2. And like I said, I'm proud of my preseason power rankings. My Super Bowl pick was the Chargers against the Saints, and the Saints here, number 1. So they're only going to move up one spot on the season, just passing the Eagles. And they just find ways to win. The defense can play when they need them. At home, they are almost impossible to beat. And we are going to do the Super Bowl predictions next week, full playoff predictions, picking every game. So hit that like button if you enjoy the power rankings, if you've enjoyed them throughout the season. Looking forward to talking to you guys in the comments. And yeah, peace out. Merry Christmas, everyone. We'll see you next time.